The young and the restless spoilers Phyllis Abbott paced the length of her drawing room, her heart pounding in her ears. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Alan Martin's pale face, sunken cheeks, and cold, accusing eyes. She couldn't understand why he hated her, or Sharon, so fiercely. The more she tried to banish his image, the more real he seemed to become, stalking her thoughts like a persistent phantom. For weeks, Phyllis had suffered sleepless nights. Doors she swore she'd locked appeared ajar, shadows on the walls flickered into Alan's outline. She began to doubt her own sanity. Yet, she refused to mention any of this to Sharon. She wouldn't risk dragging her friend into her growing nightmare. Instead, she confided in Nick Newman, her husband, whose determination to protect his family had always been ironclad. Nick sat beside her on the velvet settee one evening, evidence folder spread across his lap. "I've finally put it together," he said, tapping a photograph of Alan cuffed in a police lineup. "Alan Martin is the kidnapper. I've got security tapes, witness statements, everything we need to put him behind bars." Phyllis looked at him, tears brimming. "But why? What does he want from us?" "He's unhinged," Nick said grimly. "And I'm not taking any chances." He closed the folder, slid to his feet, and gently guided Phyllis into a hug. "I'll take care of this." Meanwhile, Chance Chancellor, newly returned to Genoa City, had caught wind of the same clues. A former FBI agent turned private investigator, Chance had his own score to settle with Alan Martin, whom he'd suspected was more than just a petty criminal. The man's erratic behavior and a trail of fragmented clues pointed to a darker truth: Alan Martin was not who he said he was. His real identity was Martin Grayson, a deeply disturbed man with a history of violence, last seen committed to an abandoned psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of town. As Chance dug deeper, he discovered that Martin Grayson had escaped custody months ago. His medical file, illicitly obtained, detailed a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and documented violent outbursts. Martin believed that Phyllis and Sharon were part of a conspiracy against him. They had to pay for crimes they never committed. Every delusion he harbored made him more dangerous. Sharon Collins Newman, hearing only fragments of these developments, was terrified. She begged Chance and Nick to let her and Phyllis stay out of it. "I can't face him," she said, voice quivering. "I'm not strong enough." Phyllis, fragile but resolute, agreed. She no longer trusted her own mind, and she couldn't bear the thought of Sharon confronting Martin's rage. So the two women stayed in a safe house provided by Nick, who watched over them like a hawk. One afternoon, Martin, still masquerading as Alan, paid a visit to Tracy Abbott's house. Tracy, ever the compassionate soul, invited him in. He sat across from her in the sunlit parlor, his eyes darting with manic energy. "I'm telling you, Tracy," Martin hissed, leaning forward. "They did this to me. Phyllis and Sharon, they ruined my life." He waved a manila envelope. "Look at these documents. Proof that they stole my inheritance, sabotaged my reputation." Tracy, trained to diffuse conflict, tried to reason with him. "Martin, these papers are forgeries. I know you're in pain, but you need help, real help." Martin's face contorted. "Help? You think they'll help me?" "No. I'll make them pay." With that, he stormed out, leaving Tracy shaken but determined to aid in his capture. That evening, Martin returned to the empty psychiatric hospital where he'd once been confined. The building was a skeleton of peeling paint, broken windows, and rusted beds still chained to the floor. Moonlight filtered through shattered skylights, casting eerie patterns on the walls. It was here that Martin felt most at home, among the ghosts of his own tortured mind. Unbeknownst to him, Nick and Chance lay in wait. They'd staked out the hospital after Chance tracked Martin's cell phone signal to this derelict landmark. Hidden behind a crumbling brick wall, they waited for the moment to strike. Hours passed in tense silence. Then, a soft creak of a door, the shuffle of footsteps. Martin emerged from the darkness, clutching a battered briefcase filled with falsified evidence. His wild eyes glowed as he scanned the courtyard. Nick whispered into his radio, "Now." Chance rose, gun drawn. "Martin Grayson." "Freeze." Martin whipped around, dropping the briefcase. "You'll never stop me." He lunged forward, arms flailing. The night exploded into violence. Chance fired a warning shot that ricocheted off a metal door. Martin staggered but kept coming. Nick joined the fray, wrestling Martin's arm to prevent him from drawing a weapon. The struggle spilled across the gravel courtyard, dust and debris kicked into the air. Phyllis's face flashed in Nick's mind, the terror, the sleepless nights. He felt rage surge through him. With a swift move, he disarmed Martin and pinned him to the ground. Chance cuffed Martin's wrists while Martin thrashed, screaming about conspiracies and betrayals. Within minutes, the ordeal was over. Martin lay subdued, breathing heavily, eyes darting in delirium. Nick and Chance exchanged a look of grim satisfaction. Chance stood and dusted off his jacket. "He's going back to where he belongs." Nick nodded, his jaw tight. "Good. Let's make sure he can't hurt anyone again." As the police arrived to take Martin into custody, the two friends allowed themselves a moment of relief. Phyllis and Sharon, safely hidden nearby, breathed easier when they heard the sirens. They knew the nightmare was finally ending. Later, back at the Newman Ranch, Nick escorted Phyllis into the grand foyer. He took her hands in his and looked into her eyes. "He's locked up. You're safe now." Phyllis let out a long, trembling sigh and collapsed into Nick's arms. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was losing my mind." Nick kissed the top of her head. "You'll never face this alone again." Outside, the moon slid behind a cloud, and the wind sighed through the trees. Inside, the Newmans and their closest friends gathered to celebrate a victory born of courage and friendship. Though the scars of Martin Grayson's terror would linger, they had faced down madness together, and emerged stronger for it. Under the shroud of a moonless night, every sound seemed amplified as Chance Chancellor and Nick Newman moved silently through the overgrown pathway leading to the abandoned psychiatric hospital. The derelict structure, with its crumbling walls and shattered windows, exuded an eerie aura. Both men were acutely aware that danger lurked in every shadow, for Martin Grayson, masquerading under the alias Alan, was a man driven by madness and a deep-seated thirst for revenge. His reputation was notorious, always keeping a loaded gun at his side. He was as unpredictable as he was lethal. One misstep, one lapse in vigilance, could mean death. As they crept closer to the main entrance, Chance's eyes never wavered. He had faced peril before, and his resolve was unshaken. Nick, though equally determined, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, protecting his family and ensuring that Martin never harmed another soul. The two men exchanged terse nods, their unspoken understanding a silent promise to stand guard until justice was served. Inside, Martin paced restlessly in the dimly lit corridor, the harsh echo of his footsteps bouncing off the peeling walls. The cold glint of his handgun was the only thing that broke the monotony of the darkness. Every fiber of his being was tuned for confrontation. He knew that his adversaries were closing in, and a sense of manic anticipation surged within him. Despite the dangerous circumstance, he clutched his weapon tightly, a symbol of his defiance and a tool for his survival. Suddenly, as if on cue, Chance and Nick launched their carefully coordinated attack. They burst into the corridor, their movements fluid and precise. Martin's eyes widened in shock as he scrambled to draw his gun, but before he could even react, Chance's commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Freeze, Martin." In that split second, all of the tension that had been building reached its boiling point. The ensuing struggle was fierce and desperate. Martin, desperate and erratic, fired a shot that ricocheted off a nearby metal door, sending sparks flying into the cold night air. But Nick and Chance, emboldened by their determination, overpowered him quickly. With a series of well-timed moves, they disarmed Martin and forced him to the ground. The sound of his fall echoed through the empty halls, a grim punctuation to the violent encounter. Outside, hidden behind a thick cluster of trees near the hospital's rear entrance, Phyllis and Sharon watched the dramatic showdown unfold. Their eyes were wide with a mixture of horror and sorrow as they witnessed the brutal confrontation. Tears streamed down their faces as the weight of everything, the fear, the betrayal, the years of living under the constant threat, became almost unbearable. In that moment, they felt an overwhelming urge to exact revenge on Martin, to lock him away in that forsaken hospital where his twisted mind had been nurtured, and to mete out a punishment that would keep him from ever harming anyone again. Phyllis, her voice trembling with raw emotion, whispered, "We should do it ourselves. We can lock him up here and make sure he never hurts anyone ever again." Sharon's eyes burned with indignation and grief as she nodded in agreement, her heart aching for the loss of innocence that had marked their long, troubled journey. But just as the simmering rage threatened to boil over, Chance's firm and steady voice intervened. He placed a calming hand on both women's shoulders, his gaze resolute. "No," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Let me and the police handle him. This isn't a vigilante situation, we're better than that. We owe it to everyone, including you both, to follow the law." His words carried the weight of authority, and slowly, Phyllis and Sharon's tearful faces began to soften with reluctant understanding. In the charged silence that followed, Nick knelt beside the fallen Martin. His eyes, though hard with determination, betrayed a flicker of compassion. "It's over, Martin," Nick murmured as he secured the handcuffs around Martin's wrists. Martin's wild eyes darted around, his breath coming in harsh, ragged gasps. The madness in his gaze was undeniable, a reflection of the chaos that had consumed him for far too long. Now, in the stark reality of his defeat, he could do nothing but seethe silently on the cold, unforgiving floor. As the distant wail of police sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of backup, Chance stepped back and surveyed the scene. He knew that this night, marked by violence and heartbreak, was only one chapter in a long saga of pain and redemption. But in that moment, the clarity of purpose was undeniable. Justice had been served through a battle of strength and will, not by the hands of vengeance. The law would now take its due course, ensuring that Martin faced the full measure of it in a courtroom rather than through personal retribution. The police, arriving in a flurry of flashing lights and authoritative shouts, quickly took control of the situation. Officers cordoned off the area, and one of them, a seasoned detective, approached Nick and Chance. "We appreciate your intervention," the detective said, his voice firm yet respectful. "We'll take it from here." Phyllis and Sharon, still standing in the shadows, clung to each other as they watched the scene unfold. Though their desire for personal revenge was palpable, they recognized the truth in Chance's words. Their anguish and grief had fueled a deep longing for immediate retribution, but they knew that true justice would not be served by their own hands. The hospital, once a symbol of Martin's dark past, would soon become a mere backdrop to the legal proceedings that would follow. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Nick, Chance, Phyllis, and Sharon slowly made their way out of the oppressive darkness of the hospital. The chill of the night air seemed to cleanse them, if only slightly, of the terror that had gripped their hearts moments before. They knew that the road ahead would be long and fraught with the lingering echoes of the night's events. Yet, as they walked together, there was a newfound sense of resolve in their steps, a commitment to let the justice system decide the fate of those who chose to sow chaos and fear. Back at the police station, Martin was led away in handcuffs, his wild eyes dimming as he was taken into custody. The finality of that moment marked not only the end of a brutal skirmish but also a turning point in the lives of everyone involved. The scars of the past would heal with time, and though Phyllis and Sharon still felt the sting of their personal losses, they took comfort in knowing that the path to healing was now in the hands of those entrusted with the law. As dawn began to break over Genoa City, casting a gentle light over the darkened landscape, Chance and Nick shared a quiet moment of reflection. They had faced death, seen the depths of human madness, and emerged victorious not through impulsive retribution, but through unwavering resolve and respect for justice. And in that dawn's early light, a fragile hope was born, a hope that someday, the wounds of the past would give way to a future of peace and safety for all. Thus, the night's terrifying events would forever remain etched in their memories, a grim reminder of the fine line between justice and vengeance, and the strength it takes to choose the path of righteousness even in the face of overwhelming darkness.